I'm in a bit of a predicament right now, and honestly, I don't know what to do. Let me start from the beginning. 5 years ago, my next-door neighbor, Charles, though we often just call him Charlie, told us his 14-year-old son had gone missing. He filed a police report. It made the news and the whole community was talking about it. My wife and I were devastated for them. We offered our help whenever we could. As time passed with no updates, we assumed they had eventually come to terms with the likely outcome. We never had the heart to ask if a body had ever been found. During the summer months, Charles and his wife, Kathy, would occasionally invite us over for barbecues, but something was always off. Kathy had grown quiet and withdrawn, and Charles seemed jumpy and awkward. Understandable given what they'd been through. Fast forward to just last week. I was taking out the trash when Charles walked over and asked to borrow a shovel. I didn't think twice. I grabbed him my best one and handed it over. He thanked me, said he had some yard work to do, and promised to return it the next day. Then he went straight into his backyard. Later, from an upstairs window that overlooks his yard, I saw him digging. It wasn't just a hole, it was big. And he looked like he was struggling a bit, which made sense. He's 56. I figured I'd grab my second shovel and lend him a hand. As I stepped into his yard and called out, he froze, dropped the shovel, and rushed over to me, clearly agitated. No, it's okay, he said. Please just leave. I asked him what the big deal was, trying to brush off his strange behavior, but he cut me off sharply. I will not allow you to use that shovel in my backyard. Then he pointed to the gate, like I was some stray dog that needed to be shooed away. I was so stunned by his reaction that I just left without a word. Back inside, I went upstairs and kept watching from the window. He kept digging for at least another 30 minutes. When he finally stopped, I saw him scanning the neighboring houses, his eyes darting up toward windows, checking to see if anyone was watching. Before I could duck out of view, he caught me at my window. All I could do was slowly walk away, pretending like nothing had happened. But something's not right. He's definitely up to something, and I couldn't let it go. I had to know what was going on. Over the next few days, I kept glancing into Charles's backyard, hoping to catch him digging again, but he never did. I figured he must have realized I'd been watching and decided to wait for nightfall. I was right. Around 1:30 in the morning, I heard the unmistakable sound of a shovel striking dirt. I rushed to my window, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. Quietly, I slipped outside and crept up to the fence. Peeking over, I saw him, clear as day under the moonlight, digging again. After a while, he went back inside the house. That was my chance. I climbed over the fence and approached the hole he'd been working on. There, sticking out from the dirt at the bottom, was a small piece of black garbage bag. I looked at his back door, then back at the hole. I did this 3 more times, torn between curiosity and fear. Part of me wanted to uncover what was inside, but in the end I chickened out and ran back to my yard. Good thing I did. Seconds later, Charles came back outside, but he didn't return to the hole. Instead, he disappeared around the side of his house and never came back. I slipped inside and got back in bed as quietly as I could, trying not to wake my wife. The next morning, the first thing I did was check the window. The hole in his yard had been completely filled in. Not only that, but I noticed his SUV was no longer in the driveway. It was parked out on the street. I don't know what happened after I went to bed, but the thought that he might have unearthed and moved something or someone haunts me. Maybe it was his son. Maybe he buried him years ago and decided it was finally time to move the body. It's all speculation, I know. Call me crazy if you want, but I haven't told a soul, not even my wife. Charles never returned my shovel. I'm not about to go asking for it either. He's been avoiding me ever since. And then yesterday, something truly unsettling happened. I just happened to glance out my window in the middle of the day and saw him, Charles, standing at one of his windows, staring directly into mine. When he realized I'd spotted him, he quickly shut the blinds. I'm honestly terrified now. I have no idea what to do. I've lived in 3 houses throughout my life, 2 with my family and now my current place, which I live in alone. We spent the first 15 years of my life in our first house, then moved to the second for the next 7 years before I finally moved out on my own. What I'm about to tell you happened during the final months of us living in that first house, back when I was 15. We were never particularly close with our neighbors back then. In fact, there were 2 boys who lived next door with their dad, Eric and Todd, and despite living beside each other for years, my brother and I had only spoken to them maybe once or twice. Strange, I know, but that was just how it was. One day, my little brother, who's 5 years younger than me, and I were outside shooting hoops on the driveway when Todd came over. He approached us and started a conversation out of the blue. I don't remember exactly what we said word for word, but the first thing he asked was whether it was true that we were moving. Being the older sibling, I did most of the talking, Todd seemed to be around my age, though I never actually asked. At the end of the short conversation, Todd invited me to join him and his brother the next day to go shoot BB guns by the river in the woods down the road. It was the weekend and I didn't have anything planned, so I agreed. At the last second, my little brother asked if he could tag along too. He didn't assume he was automatically invited, but Todd just shrugged and said, "Yeah," then walked off. The following day, about an hour before dusk, Eric and Todd rang our doorbell. We answered it quickly since our parents had no idea we were sneaking out to go shoot BB guns. Walking down the sidewalk with those two was odd. They were fully dressed in camo gear and carrying a big duffel bag filled with BB guns. The way they carried themselves, so serious and intense about it all, made me and my brother exchange glances and quietly stifle our laughter more than once. When we reached the woods, hardly a word had been spoken between us. I already had a feeling these two weren't big talkers. Maybe that's why we had barely met them before now. Once we got to the riverbank, Todd dropped the duffel bag on the ground and started unzipping it. Meanwhile, Eric stormed over to a nearby tree, snapped a thick branch clean off, and hurled it into the river with surprising force. Me and my brother just looked at each other. We didn't find it funny anymore. Todd pulled a couple of guns from the bag and handed one to me and one to my brother. That's when he casually dropped the bomb. He told us the guns were real, not BB guns, real firearms. Before I could even react, Eric yanked another gun from the duffel and started firing across the river at the trees. At that moment, it hit me. He wasn't kidding. These weren't toys. I was immediately caught between anger and disbelief. Without saying much, I snatched the gun from my little brother's hands and placed both weapons back into the bag. I told them we weren't okay with this and that we were leaving. Eric stopped shooting, and both he and Todd gave us looks that were somewhere between annoyed and hostile. One of them shouted a curse at us as we walked away. I always had a bad feeling about those two, but that moment sealed it for me. On the way home, I told my brother not to speak to them again, no matter what. Later that night at dinner, we told our parents that the boys were strange, really strange, but we left out the part about the guns. That night, I woke up to a gust of cold air hitting my face. My window was wide open. As I leaned forward to shut it, I suddenly felt something hard press against the back of my head, and then I heard a whisper behind me. Shh. Somehow I didn't scream. I froze. My body went still, but my mind kicked into high alert. Then I heard Todd's voice, quiet and calm. He told me that if I ever told anyone, especially his dad, about the guns or what happened in the woods, he'd come back and kill me and my entire family. My voice trembled as I whispered, "Okay." He gave the back of my head a push with what I could only assume was the barrel of the gun, then climbed back out through the window. For months after that, I'd occasionally spot either Todd or Eric staring into my bedroom or my brother's from one of their house's upstairs windows, always silently, always watching. As our move-out date crept closer, their behavior got even weirder. About a week before we left, I woke up around 1 a.m. to the sound of glass rattling. A rock had been thrown at my window. When I looked out, I saw Todd standing below, aiming a pistol up at me. Terrified, I dropped to the floor, bracing for the worst. But then I heard them both burst into laughter. One of them called me a like it was all some twisted game to them. There were 2 more incidents that week. More harassment, more threats, and more watching. By the time we finally moved, I couldn't have been more relieved. It felt like escaping a nightmare. After all these years, neither my brother nor I have told anyone what really happened. About the guns, the threats, the late-night visit. But we both know the truth. Those 2 boys were deeply disturbed, and getting away from them was the best thing that ever happened to us. At the time I'm writing this, it's been about 2 weeks since this happened. I've never been a fan of my neighbors, any of them really. I'm fresh out of college, living alone for the first time, and while it feels like a big step forward, it comes with compromises, namely, the location. I live in a rundown neighborhood, the only kind of place I could afford a house in right now, so it's no surprise my neighbors are far from ideal. On one side, I've got people who constantly blast music. On the other, I've got the creepiest pair I've ever encountered. It's 2 women, one older, probably in her 60s, and another who looks younger but suffers from some severe mental disability. I have no clue what their relationship is. The older woman never smiles, never greets anyone, and honestly, she doesn't seem entirely there. The younger woman is another story altogether. Often while I'm sitting on my front porch, I'll see the older woman restraining her during one of her episodes. She'll scream, rock back and forth, flail her arms, and sometimes even point at me while mumbling things to the older woman. It's deeply unsettling. There have been times I've gotten so uncomfortable I just went back inside Anyway, this all came to a head one night. It was a regular weekday evening and I had to turn in early for work the next morning. But next door, things were anything but quiet. I could hear the younger woman screaming and throwing one of her fits, and the older woman yelling back, sounding just as distressed. It lasted for over an hour. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed over and banged on their front door. The older woman opened it with a scowl and greeted me with a gruff, "What the hell do you want?" I kept my voice calm and asked politely if they could keep the noise down. She stared at me, eyebrows raised and head tilted slightly, clearly annoyed. Then, out of nowhere, the younger woman burst into the room screaming, "How dare you?" over and over. The older woman had to hold her back as she tried to get to me, and then, bam, she slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a second, stunned. I had no clue what just happened, but it sure didn't feel like anything got resolved. Still, when I got back to bed, I realized the house next door had finally gone quiet. I managed to fall asleep. That didn't last long. I woke up feeling like I'd only just closed my eyes. The clock read 3 a.m. I sighed and sank back into the pillow, hoping to drift off again. But then, I thought I heard something coming from downstairs. I sat up, listening hard. After a minute of silence, I assumed I'd imagined it and lay back down. Only 20 minutes passed before I woke up again, and this time I had no idea why. The room was pitch black, but something felt off. I didn't move at first, just listened. Then I heard it, a sound. My heart pounded as I scrambled for my phone on the bedside table, desperate to turn on the flashlight. But when I finally found my phone, I didn't dare turn on the flashlight. I froze for a moment, eyes scanning the dark room, my breath shallow as I tried to detect any movement, any silhouette, any hint of someone hiding. Every corner of the room looked empty. As pitch black as it was, I could still tell no one was standing in plain sight. I started to relax until I heard it again. This time I could tell exactly where it was coming from. I turned toward the edge of my bed, and that's when I saw it. Right at the base of the wooden frame, nearly blending into the darkness, was a black, shadowy shape. I slowly raised my phone, using the dim light of the screen to illuminate it, and that's when her face appeared. It was the younger woman from next door, her wild, deranged face inches from me. The second the light hit her, she screamed. Not just a startled scream, but an inhuman banshee-like wail, like the light was burning her, like she was some kind of vampire caught in the sun. I screamed too. Pure terror took over as I stumbled, out of bed, tripping hard as I scrambled for the door. I looked back just long enough to see her charging after me, still shrieking like a maniac. I slammed the bedroom door shut and bolted down the stairs, locking the door at the bottom behind me. Then I called the cops. While I was on the phone, she kept pounding on the door upstairs, yelling things I couldn't even begin to understand. It was just noise. Loud, jumbled, terrifying noise. When the police arrived, I told them everything. I explained that the woman lived next door and that she clearly wasn't mentally stable. Not long after, the older woman from the house next, Doker, came over, frantic after hearing the commotion. She pleaded with the officers to let the younger woman stay, but they told her she'd need to be taken in, at least for the night. As one of the officers asked me if I wanted to press charges, I noticed the older woman glaring at me. It wasn't sadness or even concern in her eyes, it was pure hatred. A cold, seething stare that didn't fade for a second. Despite everything, I chose not to press charges. I just wanted this nightmare to end. But that stare, it didn't change. They put the younger woman in the car and drove off, while the older one walked silently back to her house, eyes never leaving mine. About 5 minutes later, I saw her get in her own car and drive away. They still live next door. And now I'm seriously considering moving. That woman makes it clear every time I see her, she despises me. And as for the younger one, she's not just unstable, she's dangerous. That was another true story. But in the world of horror, truth is often stranger than fiction. If you're still watching, you're one of the brave ones. Most don't make it this far. Before you go, check behind you. Not everything that follows you makes a sound. Subscribe to Horror Stories and hit the bell because the next horror stories drop soon. And remember, the scariest stories are the ones that actually happened. Stay scared. Stay safe. We'll see you in the dark.